Channel Midnight, your horror channel. Good evening, everyone, and now let's move on to today's story, which is about Mr. Clayton, and it happened to him in the city of Alvorada, which is in Brazil, and at that time it was in 2007, Mr. Clayton was 34 years old. And today, I'm going to tell you about the day I met a creature, which was standing like people, and this beast stood on 4 legs, just to chase me. It all starts like this. I live in an area very close to the rural area of my city, and also at that time, I liked to go to a square, which was close to my neighborhood, because there was some equipment there for people to do physical exercises. But it was that one day, I was in that square in the late afternoon training, and that's when suddenly, a woman was coming with her dogs, and she sat on a bench in the square near me, and a strange man came walking by the place. But what happened is that the woman's dogs took off running to attack that strange man. The woman ran and managed to catch her dogs, but this lady found the behavior of her dogs strange because she said that her animals were calm, and she didn't understand what happened to these animals because her dogs went crazy in a strange way with the presence of that guy. After that, as it was getting dark, I went home, but a few hours passed, and around midnight, I decided to go to a place near my neighborhood to pick up a type of tea that is found in the vegetation in my area, and my wife liked it very much. Well, so I left the house and walked down the street, and there was no one around, so I passed by the square, and that's when I saw a guy coughing in that place. I looked quickly, and I saw that it was that man that the dogs tried to catch in the afternoon. Then this man started walking, and then he left the square and went into the woods and disappeared. But I left it at that and carried on walking, and finally I reached the bush, so I cut up some tea leaves and put them in a bag, and then I set off on my way home. As I was walking along the street, I heard a dog screaming in the distance, and it sounded as if something or another animal was attacking it, and that noise seemed to be coming from the bush where that wanderer had entered. I stopped walking to see what was going on, but the point was that the dog didn't bark anymore, and everything became quiet again. I kept walking, and soon I got close to the square, and I saw the shape of an animal coming out of a vacant lot, hiding behind some cars that were parked near the square street. At that moment, I froze with fear, because the creature was too big, and I didn't know what animal it was, and since this animal was still hiding behind the cars, and it even looked like it was there waiting for me to pass, I turned back and went into the square. So I climbed up on top of one of the tall pieces of equipment in the square, to see if I could find that animal, and if the beast was still behind the cars. I kept looking, but I didn't see any sign of this animal, and I also kept thinking that it could have been this beast that made that dog agonize in the bush. And while I was distracted looking for this animal, but then I saw a figure behind a tree, and I saw that it looked like a person, because it was only standing on 2 legs, and on closer inspection, it looked like a hairy man with the face of a monkey, and his ears were big, and the scariest thing was that he had lighted eyes. The fact is, when I saw this creature looking at me, I was very frightened. After a while, a man stopped his car near the square, and he started walking down the street, and he was going in the direction of the werewolf, so I shouted to that man and warned him of the danger. That man saw the creature and ran to his car, but the werewolf went running after that man. Then the guy managed to get back into his vehicle and saved himself. Then the driver honked his car, and the creature ran away frightened by the sounds of the horn. Anyway, the driver called me, and I managed to get a ride with this guy, and he took me home. I was so scared that when I went to try to sleep, I kept thinking about this beast all night. After a few hours, the day soon dawned, and with all that had happened to me, I went back to the square to see if I could find any clues about the werewolf. As soon as I got to the square, I saw the strange guy who had been coughing in the square before the werewolf showed up, and as incredible as it may seem, I got close to this guy and started talking to him about the werewolf that attacked me last night, and that he should avoid going by this place at night, because this creature that tried to get me could find him. And while I was talking to this guy, I looked over and noticed that this man was all scraped up, and he told me that a dog had bitten him. Then a car honked in the street, and strangely, this strange guy put his hands to his ears and made a pained expression on his face, as if the noise of the horn had affected him a lot. Anyway, he recovered and thanked me for the information, and then this guy disappeared. I realized that this stranger went away very frightened by what I told him about the werewolf, and after that day, I never saw this guy around my neighborhood again. But today, I've come to the conclusion that this man in the square has something to do with the werewolf that attacked me, because he started coughing and disappeared into the bushes, and then the creature appeared, and also, the woman's dogs tried to attack this man for no reason, and this suspect was irritated by the sound of the car horn, just like the werewolf, and that's why I came to this conclusion, but I could also be wrong, and I know one thing, the werewolf attacks people. And it's also very clever, because it almost surprised me, waiting for me behind the tree. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you like this real tale of terror, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next werewolf story. Fear Zone, your horror channel. Good evening everyone, and now let's get to today's story, which is about Mr. Ernesto, and it happened to him in the city of Pocos de Calda, which is in Brazil, and at that time, in 2008, Mr. Ernesto was 22 years old. And today, I'm going to tell you about the day I saw a werewolf very close to me, and I went through the greatest danger with this animal, but something surprising happened in this story. But before I start this horror story, leave your like, so we can reach 500 likes on this video, for the video to be well rated by YouTube. And now let's get to today's story. It all starts like this. I live in an urban neighborhood in my city, with paved streets and lots of houses, but one weekend, I went to a barbecue at an uncle's house, which was like a ranch or a big farm, and when I got there, I saw a lot of my relatives there. So, I talked to these relatives, and the barbecue went on until late at night, but when it got to about 2 o'clock in the morning, my relatives who were at the farm had all left. And as I liked my uncle a lot, I ended up agreeing with him to sleep at the farm that day. However, my uncle asked me to stay in one of the rooms, but as it was very hot that day, I decided to sleep in the farmyard, in a hammock that was there near the barbecue, and I was already in this hammock resting, and a while passed. Then the 2 dogs from the farm showed up and started eating the leftover meat that was in the garbage, and then those 2 dogs disappeared. But then, all was quiet at that time. I was asleep, and what happened was that I started to hear footsteps near me again, and something was rummaging through the farm's garbage, so I thought it was the dogs again, and when I looked to see what it was, I got quite a fright, because there was some kind of strange animal, a bit like a weird monkey, but this beast was much bigger than my uncle's dogs, and it was about 10 meters away from me, and I was even more frightened because of the glint of light in its eyes, which was really bizarre. At that moment, I hid quietly in my hammock, just thinking of a way to get away from this beast without being noticed, and hoping that the dogs would see it. But it all started to get strange when this creature stopped going through the garbage, and it kept circling the table where there were some pieces of meat, and that's when this creature stood up, like a man, only on 2 legs, and to my amazement, this beast started to pick up the meat with its hands or claws, and it put this barbecue meat in its mouth, and ate it. And at that moment, I had no doubt that this strange animal, which balanced on 2 legs, was a werewolf. The fact is that this beast kept fiddling with the dishes and making a lot of noise, and soon it started looking around suspiciously, and I was scared and hid in the hammock, just watching the werewolf. This beast suddenly started sniffing the air, and it was looking suspiciously at something, and to make matters worse, it started walking towards me, but lucky for me, one of the dogs from the farm started barking at it from afar, and then another dog appeared. But the werewolf didn't want to face the farm's dogs, because they were large animals, so this creature got on all fours and ran into one of the ranch's rooms and jumped out of the window. Of course, I took advantage of this moment and ran into the guest room and locked the window and door of the room, and the beast was trapped in there, and I kept thinking that I had managed to capture the werewolf. The creature scratched at the door and knocked on the window, but he didn't know how to escape from the room. Well, I stayed in another room just looking at the place where I had trapped the werewolf, and time went by, and around 4:30 in the morning, I heard some moaning noises, and it sounded like the creature was in a lot of pain. But soon it became silent, and to my surprise the window of the room where I had trapped the werewolf opened, and so I saw that a strange man jumped out of that window and started running across the yard, and he ran away. But the problem was that this guy was lame in one leg, and to me he was that werewolf. During the day, I was still a bit worried, so I left the room and went to talk to my uncle about the werewolf I saw, and the man who ran away with a limp, and my uncle told me that he had seen a werewolf when he was a teenager. And that's why he believed what I said, but my uncle was worried about the guy I saw running away, and he said he would be careful at night around the chakra, because as the werewolf found food on the farm, he could come back again. But apart from this conversation, my uncle was waiting for a man hired to clean up his ranch from the barbecue, but this guy didn't show up. My uncle seemed worried about this whole story, so at the end of the afternoon, my uncle and I went to the house of the man who was going to clean the ranch, and when we got to the guy's house, some of the neighbors said that the suspect had traveled today. Anyway, with that, my uncle and I went back to the ranch. But my uncle told me something strange, that this man who was going to clean our ranch, he had a limp in one leg, and that he had come to his house to see if he was the werewolf I had seen, and he no longer had any doubts, because the suspect had run away. The other day, I went back to my house, and after almost a month of this werewolf incident, I called my uncle and asked him about the guy he had hired to clean his farm, and my uncle told me that he never saw this guy in Vila again. After that, I know that if you roast meat on the farm at dawn, it could happen that a creature like that comes along to attack you. And also, someone who lives in your social circle could be one of these creatures. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Until next time. Fear Zone Channel, your channel of terror. Hello guys, before starting the story, leave a like on the video, and subscribe to our channel, because we have horror stories every week. And now, let's go to today's video, which is Mr. Adriano, and it happened to him in the city of Batatais, which is in the state of Sao Paulo, and at that time, which was in the year 2012, Mr. Adriano was 37 years old. And it all started like this. At that time that this story happened to me, I lived with my wife and 2 more children in a house on the outskirts of my city, but it so happened that a certain day was that I came home from work very tired, and I went to watch TV, but I ended up sleeping on the couch in the living room, and when it was around 11 o'clock at night, I woke up, and so I went to get a beer in the refrigerator to drink, but to my misfortune, had no more cans of beer, because my wife had already drunk all the beers. But as I was very eager to drink, so I decided to get my car, and after I started the car, I ended up taking the streets of my neighborhood, and driving around looking for some bar open to buy drinks, but all bars were closed at that time, and seeing that it was difficult to find a place open, so I decided to enter a lane where there was a gas station that the snack bar worked at dawn. With this, I took this route, entered a rural area of my city, and cutting through this path, I managed to get to the gas station on the road, and by my luck, the snack bar was open. There, I managed to buy my beers, and as soon as I did, I took my way back home, but returned through the countryside again until I reached a dirt road where there was a creek by the side, and it was then that my car started to give problems and ended up stopping on this road. At this point, there was no way I got out of the car in that darkness to see this problem. I looked at the engine of the car, but everything was normal in the car, and with that, I decided to start the car and started to push the vehicle to try to start the car, but while I was trying to do this, I saw through the headlight of my car an animal passing by on the road, which was about 30 meters ahead on the road, and it hid in the bushes near the creek. As soon as I saw this animal, I stopped pushing the car and stood looking at the bush where that animal was hiding. I was scared because that animal that I saw quickly seemed to be a large beast. At that moment, I got inside the car to protect myself and try to see that animal through the bush if it was still around. After a few minutes passed, I didn't find the animal anymore, so I got out of my car because I didn't see any sign of it. So, I took this moment and started to push my car again, and it worked this time, and my car started, so I got into my car, and as soon as I closed the door, however, to my surprise, a furry creature jumped out in front of my car, and this animal looked like I was very afraid because this creature had a glow in its eyes, like two lights. This creature had an ugly face, and it growled of hatred at me. As it was just an animal that I had never seen before, I didn't want to run it over, and chose to wait for the creature to go away. But to my astonishment, this creature climbed on top of my car. In my fright, I ended up speeding the vehicle too much, and the creature fell off my car, but that beast got up quickly from the ground, and it started to run away down the road after that. I started chasing this creature with my vehicle down the street, but this animal was very fast. However, I managed to catch up to it, and I closed it with the automobile, and to my surprise the animal got scared and got unbalanced and it fell into the creek, and as I didn't know exactly what kind of animal it was, I stopped the car and kept looking into the creek to get a better view of that animal, and even though it was dark in that place, I could see that creature getting up and leaving the water of the creek, and the animal walked upright like a man, only on two legs. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because to me, that creature was a werewolf. At that instant, my heart seemed to stop in my throat, just by seeing that creature, and that werewolf kept staring at me, and growling at me, and he was breathing fast and scary. I could see that it was going to attack me again, and as my car was already running, I left that place driving the car, and praying that my car wouldn't give problems, and stop again on the road. Luckily, I didn't have this problem, and managed to get home, but I didn't say anything about it to my wife. I kept thinking about this creature all night, and how lucky I was not to be attacked by this werewolf while I was pushing the car on the road. Anyway, the day dawned, and I went to work at my job, and that werewolf was not out of my thoughts. In the late afternoon, I passed again that place where the werewolf appeared to see if I could find any clue of this creature, but I found nothing. The fact is, I passed by that place on other days too, and after some time, I ended up leaving that story behind and continued my life normally. But 1 month later, after this event, I heard a news report that they had found a dead man near the road where the werewolf attacked me, and that this man had been run over around 3 o'clock in the morning, and that this guy was naked too. Well, I was suspicious of this guy because he died naked and without clothes. Then I thought, because only a man is that turns werewolf, and this guy run over on the road could be werewolf for me, because this suspect could have turned the creature and was run over as a beast, and after he died, he returned in human form. Well, I kept quiet and kept my werewolf story to myself so that no one would know, because people might think that it was me who ran over the guy on the road, and the police would end up coming after me. After this whole story, I have not heard another report of the apparition of this werewolf in my region. But I give a warning, be careful walking in dark and isolated places at dawn, because you run the risk of being attacked by a werewolf. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you like the story, like it and subscribe. Until the next horror video.
Fear Zone, your sinister channel for the most terrifying narratives of reality. Now we're going to enter Junior's dark story, a dive into the abysses of the city of Barreiras, Brazil, in the macabre year of 2013, when Junior was 22 years old. Junior, young and fearless, had his destiny intertwined with the supernatural, and tonight and today we embark on this journey full of darkness and unmentionable secrets, as the story that unfolds goes beyond the boundaries of conventional horror. I live in an ordinary village with my parents, a facade of normality that hides the shadows that lie ahead. However, nearby, a ranch in the countryside is home to relatives, and it is there that the sinister plot begins to weave itself. The normality of the village crumbles in the face of the imminence of the rural terror that is unfolding. Prepare to witness what goes beyond the serene appearances of this apparent community. My cousin, a resident of the ranch, invited me to a forró party, that dancing melody that echoes in Brazilian hearts. The apparent joy of the celebration hid a darker plot, and I reluctantly accepted his invitation. At the end of the week, I went to my cousin's house lost in the countryside where my grandfather's uncle was also. The atmosphere, initially impregnated with festivity, was eclipsed by my grandfather's ominous warning. He called for us to avoid a specific path towards the forró, warning of supernatural events in the region. Ignoring the old man's omens, my cousin belittled his words, labeling him a gaga. Darkness was beginning to wither the light of the celebration, and little did I know the terror that awaited us in the undisturbed trails of the region. However, my grandfather's macabre tale echoed, injecting terror into my being. He warned us that a few days ago, he had returned from an extra job at 1 o'clock in the morning, hitching a ride with his boss in a pickup truck. In the middle of the journey, the headlight revealed an aberrant creature on the side of the dirt road. The chills intensified when my grandfather described the grotesque figure, standing like a man but an amalgamation of dog and monkey. The boss, stunned, stopped the truck staring at the beast. A moment of bewilderment enveloped them both as the creature, confused, stared at them. In an instant, it crouched and took off in desperation, galloping on all fours like a demonic dog. And the yellow in the werewolf's eyes was a demonic gleam that would haunt the nightmares of any brave soul. Terror, now palpable, crept through the shadows, and the path to the forró became a portal to the unknown. Despite the old man's warning, terror crept in. My cousin, skeptical, ignored the warning, dismissing the story. We left the house, heading down the forbidden path towards the forró party. I tried in vain to persuade him to avoid that haunted route, suggesting safer streets. He obstinately opted for the forbidden shortcut, believing it would be quicker. On the gloomy path, lined with old lampposts, the darkness was oppressive. Semi-arid forests whispered unknown secrets. It was midnight, the atmosphere was full of suspense, my heart was pounding to the beat of the unknown. The road, lit only by the weakness of the street lamps, revealed grotesque shadows. Every step was an invitation to terror, and the distant forró party seemed like a pact with the supernatural. Fate, dark and inescapable, awaited in the implacable darkness of midnight. As we made our way along the road, we abruptly came across a small goat's corpse on the side of the road. The macabre sight revealed only the carcass, vestige of a ferocious attack. The deep and numerous marks denounced the cruelty of the predator. The air carried the smell of recent death, and our fear increased when we realized that the animal was still warm. The sinister image paralyzed us, terrifying our senses. The silence, broken only by our beating hearts, echoed the proximity of the unknown. The darkness, now impregnated with the spectre of carnage, whispered secrets of impending horrors. The road ahead became a labyrinth of fear, and the gloomy foreboding hinted that death, voracious and indifferent, was dancing around us. The anguish persisted, but we continued along the nefarious path. We approached a house by the side of the road, witnessing a scene that chilled our souls. In the yard, restless goats were stirring, as if sensing the proximity of evil. Driven by curiosity, we peered into the vacant lot next to the fence, illuminated only by the dim light of the house. Our hearts pounded as we saw a figure, crouching and kneeling like a human figure. An anguished pause gripped my cousin and me as we tried to decipher the enigma in front of us. The darkness seemed to manifest itself in disturbing shapes, and the flickering light in the house revealed a sinister presence waiting to reveal itself fully. The suspense grew, and the next sighting would be the key to unlocking the terror that lurked in that gloomy night. The horror unfolded before our eyes as we stared at the shadowy figure. Suddenly, the dogs in the house erupted into deafening barking, announcing the presence of the stranger. The figure, previously kneeling, rose majestically, assuming a human posture. However, what was revealed before us was a materialized nightmare. With our hearts racing, we realized it wasn't a man. Horror seized us as we gazed at its large ears and completely hairy body. This grotesque being defied all the laws of nature, like an aberration born of forbidden nightmares. The flickering light of the house revealed the truth. We were facing something that transcended human comprehension, a manifestation of the terror that lurks in the shadows. The unknown was unveiling itself, and fear clung to us like an eternal shadow. Dread gripped us as the creature turned its misshapen head towards us, a head that, when revealed, resembled that of a distorted dog in a nightmare. The eyes, two incandescent lights, pierced our souls like blades of terror. It was undeniable, in the face of such a grotesque sight, that we were facing a werewolf, an aberration that defied reason. A chilling certainty echoed through my being, for this beast was identical to the one described by my grandfather. His warning came true before our terrified eyes. The presence of the supernatural, with its luminous eyes and distorted form, merged with the darkness, creating an image that would haunt our minds forever. We were facing the living manifestation of the unknown, a werewolf that, for an instant, made our own fears tangible. The terror intensified with every heartbeat. As these thoughts echoed, the beast fixed its evil gaze in our direction. In a chilling instant, it crouched down, assuming the four-legged hunting stance. The brutal realization that we were the prey triggered a primal instinct for survival. Without hesitation, my cousin and I burst into a desperate run, each step echoing the roar of terror that was chasing us. The sound of the werewolf's paws echoed down the dark road, fueling our anguish. I looked back, a gesture that turned out to be a pact with despair. And there the beast was, slinking through the shadows, its terrifying presence only steps away from us. Panic intertwined with gasping for breath as the werewolf mercilessly hunted us through the dark night. Every shadow, every twisted branch became an accomplice to our desperation as we fled the clutches of the creature that had emerged from our darkest nightmares.
Momentary relief came when a car approached on the deserted road. Desperately, we tried to signal the driver for help. However, our hopes were dashed when we noticed a woman behind the wheel. In a frenzy of fear, she accelerated the car and disappeared into the night, leaving us at the mercy of the darkness. We were perplexed, wondering if she was afraid of a robbery or if she had also seen the beast on the road. When I looked back at the road, there was still no sign of the monster. The silence that followed was more unsettling than any roar, leaving us adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The road, now devoid of witnesses, was the scene of a nightmare that dissolved as mysteriously as it had appeared. The unknown, dark and elusive, whispered that our encounter with the supernatural was far from over. Gasping for breath, heart pounding, we continued to escape, even after the hitchhiker slipped away. Finally, we reached a village ahead, where we stopped our frantic running. The momentary relief did not dispel the anguish that enveloped us. My cousin and I, trembling with terror, kept a wary eye on each other, fearing that the beast might surprise us at any moment. The silence in the village seemed to scream with the uncertainty of what awaited us in the shadows. Every shadow, every whisper of the wind, fueled our paranoia. The trauma of the relentless hunt haunted us, even in the relative safety of the village. The night, now impregnated with the specter of the unknown, shaped our cautious steps. Terror, although momentarily removed, continued to lurk in every dark corner, like an ominous promise that the night still held terrifying secrets. Arriving at the Foro party brought little relief to my haunted spirit. Despite the lively music and the hustle and bustle of the hall, the shadow of that sinister night persisted in my mind. Entering the hall, the festive atmosphere clashed brutally with the terrifying memories of the dark road. The desolation that hung over me like a macabre fog undermined any attempt at joy. Even in the midst of laughter and dancing, the memory of the werewolf chasing us haunted every step. The once promising party turned into a stage of silent lament, where my soul still echoed the cries of the night before. Discouragement eclipsed any remnants of fun, and I found myself drowning in a sea of anguish, unable to escape the clutches of the terror that had taken deep root in my soul. The end of the Foro didn't dispel the tension that enveloped us. At 4:30 in the morning, even immersed in fear, my cousin and I headed for the bus stop. A few brave souls were waiting for the bus in the afterglow, but the darkness still persisted. We stood there, watching the dawn try to penetrate the shadows, hesitant to once again face the dirt roads that had witnessed our nightmare. Every minute at that bus stop was an eternity, with our eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, wary of any suspicious movement. The dawn, rather than bringing relief, seemed to reveal the extent of our vulnerability. Fear, like a traumatic shadow, persisted, even in the fragile light of the new day. We were trapped between the dread of last night and the uncertainty of the unfolding morning, in a limbo where terror continued to whisper its veiled threats. Time dragged on agonizingly as we boarded the bus, seeking the comfort of my cousin's house. When we arrived, exhausted, we sank into the sheets in search of some refuge from last night's shadows. Sleep, however, was interrupted by silent nightmares. In the middle of the afternoon, breaking through the veil of sleep, I woke up with a heaviness in my heart. I hesitantly sought out my grandfather to share the truth he had tried to warn us about. The certainty of this revelation took root in me like a seed of horror, transforming what was once a vague suspicion into a terrifying reality. The dark night still echoed in every nook and cranny of my mind as I confronted the undeniable truth that had manifested itself in the form of a monster we had believed to be the fruit of legend and superstition. The haunting persisted, days after the encounter with the werewolf. The image of that macabre creature continued to haunt my thoughts, an unwelcome specter that refused to disappear. However, the terror narrative took on a new dimension a few weeks later. Regional newspapers and radio stations began to broadcast disturbing reports from people in rural areas. The creature, now attributed to possibly being a goatsucker, was sowing panic by sucking the blood of goats and sometimes brutally mutilating these animals on farms. The terror that was once personal now expanded to haunt the whole region. The line between the real and the supernatural, once clear, began to blur in the face of reports that echoed a darker truth than any legend could suggest. The fear that had once been my solitary companion was now becoming a symphony of horror shared by the entire rural community. Uncertainty hung like a shadow as the media mentioned the mysterious chupacabra. For me, however, it was clear as night that the real architect of the terror was the werewolf I had witnessed. An insidious suspicion whispered that the media, in collusion with the obscure, were hiding the truth. The wolf in sheep's clothing, camouflaged as a goatsucker, served as a smokescreen to calm the locals, while the real horror persisted in the shadows. Doubt about the reality of the creature was a poison that seeped in, questioning the sanity of my own perception. The comedy presented by the media, disguised as jocular reports, seemed like another trick to dilute the bitter truth that lurked in the darkness. Terror now meant not only facing the beast but also deciphering the veils of deception that obscured the macabre truth that haunted those foggy nights. The shadow of terror continues to hang over me, eating away at any remnants of courage. Avoiding the dark woods has become an agonizing necessity, especially at night, as the mere thought of entering the creature's territory paralyzes me with fear. The vivid memory of the werewolf with its macabre figure and glowing eyes echoes like a constant nightmare. The dread of crossing paths with the beast is overwhelming, as the feeling that the next time could be fatal torments my thoughts. The luck that favored us that early morning when the werewolf was driven away by a car is a fragile blessing. The uncertainty of what will happen the next time darkness falls holds me captive. The throbbing need to unravel the mystery surrounding the metamorphosis of that beast plagues my thoughts. However, my grandfather, wise and cautious, warned me about the futility of this quest. The alarming news in the newspapers and on television had brought about an irrevocable change. The man trapped in the skin of a werewolf would not be found in the region. The hunt that was underway, fueled by sensationalist rumors, had forced him to abandon his home, fleeing away from prying eyes and vigilante hands. Sadness and resignation hung over this story, for the creature, escaping into the unknown shadows, carried with it the secret of a curse that persisted like a scar on the soul of those lands. The enigma of the werewolf, shrouded in a veil of despair, would remain untouched, defying any attempt to reveal the truth behind the monstrosity that plagued those unforgettable nights. The warning echoes like a dark whisper, piercing the soul with the certainty of the unknown. Beware, werewolves lurk, ready to emerge from the darkness of the dirt roads. Thank you ominously for sharing this moment of terror with me. If the story sent a chill down your spine, leave your like as a silent pact. Subscribe, not as mere spectators, but as companions on this journey through the shadows. Until next time, when the boundaries between the real and the unthinkable will once again dissolve, revealing the horrors that await in the folds of eternal night.